Welcome to Thinking Like a Lawyer with your hosts Elie and Joe Patrice, talking about legal news and pop culture, all while thinking like a lawyer. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law. With me, Elie Mystal. How are you, man?
Fuck.
I assume that's because as you were telling me earlier, your child had defecated on you earlier today.
Nope. I would take every diaper full of poop in the world on my bed, on my headboard, if I could change the results of this election.
Okay.
Like, I would take that for America. I would take every baby's dirty diaper every morning for America.
Wow. Oh, okay. I mean, that's a statement there.
Of course, I'm African American, so America would never take that deal.
Well, I mean,
my money's no good here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's also not a deal that like anyone can actually do. Like, it's not like a functional deal, right? Like, we don't operate in that way.
How do we operate, Joe? You're white. You tell me. How do we operate? How does this work now?
I mean, right now we deal with a few years of fairly incompetent, largely alt-right leadership, and move on from there. Certainly not an ideal world, but hey. You
realize that not all of us are going to survive this, right?
Oh God, no. Many of us are going to die. Yeah. It's the, I actually think of the Simpsons sequence when they go to the summer camp, and there's a point where she's like, Lisa says, I'm afraid we're going to die. And Bart says, we're all going to die, Lisa. And she says, I meant soon. And he said, so did I. That sums this up. So yeah, that
only strain of hope here is, and for you listeners who know me well, you know that or at least follow me on Facebook, you know that I named my first son Claudius after the Robert Graves novel I, Claudius. Near the end of the novel, when Claudius is emperor of Rome, and Claudius had always wanted Rome to be a republic, and found himself kind of as an emperor somewhat reluctantly. As he's thinking about his successor, he starts repeating almost in a senile way, let all the poisons that lurk in the mud hatch out. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel, that the only way forward is, the only good thing is that now these people, these motherfuckers, the white supremacists, now they're going to get what they want. Now they're going to get what they've always wanted. And we'll see. We'll see how the rest of America likes living in that world. Now,
and that of course is Claudius Caesar, who handed over power to Nero.
Exactly. That was his. Was
good job.
Right.
And good job.
Well, and from Claudius,
good life model.
From Claudius's perspective, Nero would be so bad that the Roman people would revolt and demand a republic. Of course it didn't.
Or his wife poisoned him. One or the other. So,
I am talking about a novel.
Yeah, well, or a life novel, historical events. They all kind of play together. So that all happened. So we were going to talk about kind of moving past the fact that it happened and into some of the stuff about what it might mean. And you've talked before. You and I've run some events. We went to some law schools to talk about the upcoming Supreme Court term, which we thought would be very different. But one thing you mentioned at those always was that you were very concerned about, regardless of which presidential candidate won, that there might be an upcoming assault on something of some freedom of the press standards that we all take for granted.
Yes, and I don't take them for granted. I know that I am lucky to live in a place where I can call the president-elect a racist motherfucker, and not have the cops kind of bashing down my door as soon as I say that on air. But I am worried about whether or
that.
not those freedoms will maintain. And as you said correctly, Joe, I was worried about that somewhat regardless of who was elected. If Hillary elected, we would have elected somebody who was notoriously combative with the media, and perhaps has no love for standards such as Times v. Sullivan, New York Times v. Sullivan, which is so important. Now that Trump is here, I mean, this guy has bragged about wanting to open up the libel laws, and especially the thing that pisses him off most, right, is our ability as a press person to have celebrities and other public people have to meet a really high standard before they can sue us for defamation or libel or whatever. Trump hates that, and now he's going to get his way. So if you hear somebody, if you hear if you hear my windows breaking, that's the cops coming for me.
Right. Well, yes. Hopefully we don't hear that now because the microphone is fairly sensitive. So we're trying to get a clean recording here. So transitioning from that, though, that's why we brought on the guest that we brought on today. So we have with us Charles Glasser, who's does lots of things with regards to the media and law. He teaches at NYU School of Journalism. He's been a reporter on that side of the media world, but he's also been a lawyer working in the past with Bloomberg on making sure that they uphold media ethics, I guess. He's the editor of the International Libel and Privacy Handbook, and we thought that he's probably the right person to bring on to talk about what the next few years of libel, media ethics, the relationship of the president to the media, etc., is going to be like. So welcome to the show, Charles.
Hey, thanks, guys. You set it up pretty nicely. Elie, I wouldn't worry about brickbats being thrown through your window anytime soon. It's always good to be vigilant and you want to freak out, go ahead, freak out. But I'm actually by way of disclosure here, I did not vote for either Secretary Clinton or Mr. Trump, just so we get that out of the way. But I have been in the media industry as a reporter and as a lawyer. I was in-house. I was global media counsel actually at Bloomberg for 14 years. So yeah, I've got some pretty good perspective on it. If I could just throw something out there that I think might give you sleep maybe half a wink better, Elie, is there's a phrase going around that I quite find interesting. I think it's actually pretty accurate, especially to this point. Trump's detractors take him literally, but don't take him seriously. And Trump's supporters take him seriously, but don't take him literally. Now, you could do hours of shows about whether, having a game show president is a good thing or a bad thing. Italy survived having a celebrity president or prime minister. Italy's always messed up, but this guy, frankly, in my view, is much more Berlusconi than he is Hitler. Did you guys catch the tweets that the New York Times sent out during his meeting yesterday, Trump's meeting with the New York Times?
Amazing.
Well, that kind of goes to my point. This is a guy, and by the way, again, full disclosure, the Washington Post wrote about my personal battles with Mr. Trump. He threatened to sue my reporters in libel and wrote what I would call an incoherent screed, putting it nicely to me. That was very, very, and this is before he was running. And the guy really does talk that way. It's really freakish, sad. He ends every paragraph with an ejaculatory adverb. Sad, pathetic. The guy really does talk that way. But all that being said, I think with regards to the First Amendment, and where do we stand? And I know, Elie, you're not going to like this, but we've got to contextualize some things here. Jill Abramson, hardly a Trump supporter, hardly an alt-right nut, and Ron Fournier, again, a very middle-of-the-road guy and a great political reporter who probably, as experienced as anybody I know out there, among many others, called the recent 8 years the worst years for journalism and particularly transparency that they'd ever seen. I don't mind reminding you that President Hope and Change wiretapped reporters, intercepted emails, did a lot of stuff that was downright Nixonian. And that's by no way justifying Trump or his threats or bullying, as Susan Sager wrote in the ABA Journal, libel bullying and all that. It's not to excuse that, but let's keep a little perspective here. So in the Times talk, in the talk yesterday, they asked him, and I thought they did a pretty good job, at least from what I could get out of it. They said, well, don't you realize that this actual malice thing might actually be used against you sometime? That it's actually, this is something you might want to keep. And his comment was something, I don't want to say conciliatory. I mean, when he made that comment about, that might be true or you might be right or I hadn't really thought about it, how would you have characterized that remark?
That was my take on it. He said something like, wow, I never really thought about that. I'd have to look back at that or something like that. But it played into another thing that I saw from the Times write-up of it, which was that they were somewhat astounded by how thinly thought out a lot of his positions were.
Oh,
including
absolutely.
This one.
Yeah. And that, I mean, and that.
Oh no, the Times was astounded.
Well,
of course they were.
The Times, yeah, but the Times, in all fairness, and I think Beck Hay even acknowledged this on Sad Wednesday after the election. I call it Sad Wednesday. I mean, he had done this sort of, that or was it actually, it was Sulzberger's letter, wasn't it? Not Beck Hay, saying, we need to reaffirm ourselves and look a little deeper, more introspection, yada, yada, yada. And frankly, if the Times were all that shocked, then I think at how poorly thought out and how maybe, Trump might reconsider things, then I do think that there's some currency to the notion that, maybe you guys you didn't really have a good bead on him. This was the outrage election, right? I mean, every time somebody said something, whether it be Hillary or Trump, every time somebody said something, everybody flipped out and reacted, right? It would be, just like, and it's still going on, the slightest bump in the road and everybody freaks out. If you followed him closely, or in my case, where you've had personal experience with the guy, I think you realize that there was some considerable currency to the I think much more solid argument that the Clinton camp put out there is about temperament. Is this guy suitably tempered to be the leader of the free world, as it were? And I thought that's a very valid and important question. That being said, it goes back to his supporters not taking him literally. And this is a guy, I mean, really, the smartest thing Kellyanne Conway did was take the BlackBerry away from him. I mean, so
can I,
as to the first, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So can I tell you why I think most of that is bullshit? First of all, I think it's really important, I think, for me at this point, to stand against the kind of false equivalency reporting that has happened.
Oh, that's
so
the old
often,
buzzword. That's the hold it.
During,
Stay current. The new buzzword is normalization. False equivalency. So 3 weeks ago.
No, we're going to get to normalization in a second, but when you talk about President hope and change. You know what wasn't happening to reporters during Obama's administration? They weren't being Jewish reporters were not being singled out on Twitter by white supremacists, just as
Wrong.
they try to go about
After
their
the Madoff
business.
case, I defended reporters
the whole
who got anti-Semitic hate mail from people.
The three parentheses things that started happening to Jewish reporters because of a Chrome app or whatever, that wasn't happening in 2010. So when you talk about
Wait,
Trump's
you're telling me that anti-Semitism is new?
No, I'm not saying that it's new, but I'm saying the specific attack on the press that's going to come at Jewish reporters, minority reporters, and female reporters is going to be ratcheted up to 11 under the Trump administration. And we can't talk about how Trump will deal with the press without acknowledging that he is going to deal with minority members in the press differently than he's going to deal with white people in the press.
Well, that's hysterical conjecture.
Well, doesn't that? That glosses over a lot of.
I'm not glossing over it. I'm saying I'm saying that wherever it was in 2010, all that's happening is that it's going to go to 11 in 2017. And while you can sit there and feel very confident that...
Well, we can make... your track record on predictions isn't exactly, spot on. Otherwise, we'd be waiting for the coronation on the 20th, okay? And I can tell you...
Yeah, we all got that wrong.
From personal experience, I'm not joking. When Bernie Madoff went to jail... or was charged, actually, and the scope of his misdeeds was, finally being reported. I personally had to retain, I was still running Bloomberg, I had to retain security people to look into threats that some of our Jewish op-ed writers were getting. Because you Jews steal money. You can imagine the kind of nuts that are out there. You know that. And... I hardly need to tell you that even going back further, what kind of racist garbage people like Earl Caldwell used to get in the mail every time he dared write a story exposing, police brutality or whatever. I'm not saying, I don't think anybody in their right mind denies that it happens. And I personally, and look, man, and you guys know I'm not defending any of that nonsense. I'll even go as far as to say, yeah, there may have been an emboldened uptick. Although my personal theory, like when you see some of the graffiti and stuff, go for the simplest answer, Occam's razor and all that. I personally think a lot of it is drunk 16-year-olds, but that doesn't make it right, obviously. But look, you're projecting forward this sort of police state cracking down on minority reporters. By dint of you're not unreasonably based. I certainly grant you that. You're not unreasonably based concerns about some of the people that Mr. Trump has surrounded himself with. Now he has, in his defense, I suppose, or for fairness' sakes, he has several times now said, "Look, these people don't speak for me," and you've got to admit it would be dumb and a waste of time and unfair to President Obama every time some nut on Twitter posts an over-the-top, Black Lives Matter sort of, kill all the white people. Well, Obama's not obligated to denounce each and every one. Come on.
Well, that's incredibly different. That's incredibly different, though, right? Like one of these institutions is a hierarchical institution that has holds these rallies that we're seeing pictures of. They have media outlets that they own. They're a presence that is these alt-right organizations that have platforms in Breitbart.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I'm being very serious.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the alt-right is like an organized, centralized thing, like it's a group?
Oh no, it's not. Well, sort of. I think that it is. I think that it is a conglomeration of. It's a conglomeration of loosely organized groups. For instance, you have these folks showing up at the rally that we saw pictures of earlier.
200 people, yeah.
They all may be from different organizations.
This is the part where you try to say that the actual white supremacists that are cresting Trump to power aren't really that important, or there aren't that many of them, or they don't really matter. And you try to find some way you're not trying to justify their behavior, but you're trying to minimize their impact.
Well, I'm not minimizing their impact. I'm saying that silencing them and freaking out about them is not the way to defeat them. And here we go to our friend, the First Amendment.
And that's fair. And that's where I actually want to transition, because I think you said something earlier that I wanted to get back to that actually speaks directly to this, right?
Yeah.
To what extent does the fact that the last administration reflected and built a legal case for a lot of troubling interventions in media, wiretapping, as you said, and so on and so forth, the way in which those sorts of executive overreaches became somewhat institutionalized over the last 8 years, what concerns should we have that those now in different hands can be utilized in a much more destructive way?
Okay, well, actually, that's a great question, and this is why, believe it or not, I'm actually fairly optimistic, and this goes even to the more overarching, the Margaret Sullivan over at the Post, formerly the ombudsman at the Times, public editor at the Times, wrote a very piercing, I thought, column about this, holding the TV executives to shame, really, to scorn, for their having this off-the-record meeting, where allegedly Trump, because I wasn't there, but, he really dressed them down and yelled at them. And Margaret, I thought, did a great job pointing out how, these cozy off-the-record things, that's just not journalism. That's not how we do it. You're absolutely right that you want to talk about normalization, the fact that DOJ or DIA or CIA or NSA or any other branch of the government can go into a FISA court and pretty much get your phone records, you as a reporter, and actually try and do phishing or pose as an Associated Press reporter, any one of a number of really despicable acts to try and pierce the protections for reporters that that we're supposed to be enjoying. And yeah, there's been a very bad precedent set for that. And at the same time, I'm kind of optimistic, and I'll tell you why. Because the people freaking out about, I laughed when Trump snuck out of his golden-plated, that monstrosity Trump Tower, that's like somebody went in there and said, that doesn't look expensive enough. Put some gold over there, that really ugly thing. So he snuck out, right, and had his steak dinner, and the press pool freaked out because he didn't bring them along, right? I thought that was very, very telling. And we have had too cozy and too kissy face a relationship between national media and the administration. And we need to get back to some basics here. If you are a journalist, a politician is your sworn enemy, period. And our job is to cover an administration, not cover for it. And our job is Glenn Greenwald wrote a really, really sharp, I don't agree with Glenn on a lot of stuff.
I was just going to quote that, yeah.
Yeah, Glenn's article was spot on. It's like,
it was great.
Dear Mr. Politician, fuck you. You need us more than we need you. We're going to cover what you say and do.
This guy just spent 18 months playing the largely white mainstream media like a freaking harpsichord, and you're confident, even hopeful, that now they're going to start holding him to account. Really?
Oh, absolutely. They're not going to get the coziness. They have no love for him. I got to tell you, look at his perspective, and you could see, if you look at his, I don't want to play amateur psychologist, so I won't say his sociopathic nature. I'm just going to say, you look at his pattern of conduct, right? this is a guy who feels that they're all unfair and they're all stacked against him, right? So when he meets with them, he figures, well, what has he got to lose by playing hardball? And let's face it, do you really think, honestly, black or white isn't the issue? Do you really think that any of the mainstream reporters worth half a grain of salt are going to start playing access journalism and cozy journalism and start treating him, nice, the way he wants? Because all he wants is public relations. He doesn't want news. Well, that ain't going to happen.
They're not going to start treating him the way he wants, because what he wants is fellatio on demand. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be
exactly.
nice.
So screw that and screw him. Cover him.
But that doesn't mean
cover what he says
that
and
doesn't mean
does.
they're not going to be nice to him.
Say what?
That doesn't mean they're going to be nice to him. They already play his game. He already played them, as we're all pointing out. He already played them with the off the record bullshit, with the network television anchors. He already played them with the Hamilton tweets. He's going to continue playing them with the Hamilton tweets, and I have absolutely no confidence in the ability of mainstream media to hold him accountable for his actions. I don't even have any confidence in their ability to accurately explain what he's doing.
Well, I don't know. I think Fahrenholt's done some great reporting, and the Journal's done. I think there's some good reporting out there, and I think, provided that the news organizations have the resources to do it, I think we are going to see a return and hopefully a renaissance of investigative reporting and hard-hitting reporting about a government. Because you sure as fuck didn't see that with Fast and Furious. You sure as fuck didn't see that on Operation Choke Point. You sure as fuck didn't see that on what they did to James Ricin. You sure as fuck didn't see it on the Department of Justice slow-walking the voter suppression allegations that were made with the Black Panthers standing with nightsticks in front of a voting booth. Now, whether you think those stories whether you think those stories have granularity or not isn't the point. The fact is that the news organizations did not dedicate any kind of real resources to those. And I'm hopeful that, okay, now we got a guy in the White House who's really bent over. I think they're in a good position to really sock it to him hard.
Well, here's where
they're not going to get access journalism.
Can I ask the question this way, though? Why do you think that matters? For instance, this weekend, apparently, the mainstream media just figured out that fake news was a thing. Welcome to the fucking party, guys, right?
I know. And they still can't figure it out. Have you seen what their list of corrective measures is?
Yes.
They're begging to be pwned still.
So why do we even think that what the media, and we can disagree about whether or not the media will be effective, has been effective, can be more effective in the future. Why do we think that it's going to matter what the media says about this guy?
Well, that's a great question, and I had a conversation with somebody recently about this. Actually, it was Judy Miller came to my I teach graduate school, by the way, at the NYU Graduate School of Journalism, and we did a module on confidential sourcing and what it's like to go to jail. So she can speak very, very directly to that. And afterwards, we had a conversation, and we were all talking about, has the press lost its ability to impact, which is really what you're asking. Like, so what if the press reports it? And, I have to say, I'm of two minds about that. I haven't come down really hard one way or the other. I think it takes some real thought. But let me answer the question with a question. Is it the media's role to be a kingmaker? Is it the media's role to decide who should and shouldn't be elected? Or is it the media's role? Do you guys know the first canon of the SPJ ethics principles? Do you know what that is?
No.
I'm taking that silence as a no.
No.
The SPJ canon, the first rule, seek truth and report it. That's the rule. The canon. It's not try and influence the outcome to what you think is better, because that's paternalism. That can't be right. And it isn't try and install in power people who will serve your interests. That's not it. That can't be right. Seek truth and report it. Now, your question about, and look, this is what a lot of people felt even going into Sad Wednesday, was how can America buy this? Are we that stupid? You know? And let me ask you, Elie, this is something that I've been wrestling with. I see so many people saying, oh, fake news, how can people be so stupid? Surely you're not suggesting a literacy test for voting. I remember I'm old enough to remember the last time that happened. We called it Jim Crow. So instead of asking black people to read some, medieval Latin document and then say, oh, sorry there, boy, you can't vote, So now it's, well, do you read the New Yorker? Oh, you don't know David Remnick? Sorry, you don't get to vote. And I'm actually getting that.
I don't even see how I'm
actually hearing that.
Going from one to the other.
No, I actually do see the issue there, and I think that there is obviously something very troubling about saying that people who aren't caught.
Can you white-splain that connection for me, Joe?
No. The argument is that the way in which people are trying to deal with fake news is by saying, oh, well, if you don't have these certain academic requirements and read these sources that are the good sources, then you shouldn't be able to vote. And that is incredibly fraught with the opportunity for all sorts of mischief. That is what Charles is talking about, which I think is fair. I also don't.
And indeed, if you look at the guidelines that are being bantered around, I know, look, I've litigated many constitutional cases, and you guys would be the first to admit that were it state action, they would fail a constitutional challenge for being content-based, overbroad, and not narrowly tailored.
Yeah, right.
No doubt about it.
Which is why nobody is talking about state action.
Sort of leaves us.
Nobody's talking about state action.
No, we're not. But
no, we're talking. But the issue is that the problem here is not any of these fake news in a lot of ways, because I also don't think one thing about how Facebook operates is it's not like that fake news was getting in front of people whose minds were potentially getting changed. It is the way that algorithm operates. It's a bunch of Nazis sharing Nazi stuff,
Right.
No, you're quite right, and I was joking all through the election that there were probably maybe 50 people who were undecided a week before the election. You're quite right, and there is a lot of confirmation bias, and indeed in social media, people tend to read the things that they want to read and that with which they agree. But the larger point, though, beyond fake news and social media, is I hear people decrying, why aren't these are media people saying, why didn't we have the impact? Why didn't they listen to Kurt Fahrenhold? Why didn't they listen to, this guy and that guy, exposing Trump as a lousy businessman, as a con man, as a fraud? These are all their adjectives, but they are all based, they're not without some foundation, right? I mean, you'll agree with me there, right? Surely. Yeah. So why didn't we listen? Well, Americans must be dumb. And I find that approach with regard to free speech and in general to be horrifically paternalistic, horrifically dehumanizing. Believe it or not, you have to go back to John Locke and people like that, but you have to be committed to the idea that false speech must be heard so that we can find true speech. And that you will not know the truth unless you have falsity by which to compare it to. This is the touchstone. This is the motive force of the Constitution, at least with regard to free speech.
Why can't both things be true? Why can't we both say that we respect and defend speech in all of its different outlets and expressions?
With some limitation, obviously,
Even false speech? Why can't we both say that we defend even false speech and say that Americans are fucking idiots? Like, why can't both of those be true?
Oh, I think they can be true. I think that's. I don't think you're not going to get a whole hell of a lot of an argument from me about that. I mean, it's a republic if we can keep it. And how we've managed to hang on for these 200 plus years, I mean, we've had some pretty bad ideas, and some pretty bad ideas have been codified. You're the last person I'd lecture about Dred Scott or Buck v. Bell, right?
Right.
We've had some pretty bad ideas in the past. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution, not exactly our finest hour, but we're going to make mistakes, and it is up to a free and independent press to point out those mistakes. The thing that's really, because I did want to make sure that we touched, at least I touched on something that you had raised earlier, and that's Trump's, when he was throwing red meat to the groundlings, if I can mix my metaphors a little bit. When he was like, we're going to open up the libel laws, and everybody freaked out. A very good friend of mine, and I commend you to read it, it's in the New Jersey Law Journal last week, Bruce Rosen, a really terrific guy and a very skilled media litigator, and also a former reporter, wrote an article about how remarkably difficult, in practical terms, it would be to move backwards from Times v. Sullivan. I think it would be almost impossible. I haven't really put my mind to it, but I think it would be almost impossible to draft legislation that would not be unconstitutional. Legislation trying to do that. And there's also a little bit more optimism in another sense to be had there. Look, you have to, another disclosure, I'm a neurotic Jew, so my default position is optimism. It's like, well, it could be worse. That's just my nature. And I think one of the things that really, there is some light at the end of the tunnel there. And I don't mean to speak cruelly about somebody, but here I go. Look, I don't think Trump I don't think he has what we would call book smarts. He doesn't have the ability to sit down and burrow through 300 pages of legislative text, right? You grant me that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. And this is a guy who, at best, would delegate things out. And I personally, and I say this based on intuition, no inside information, just observation and intuition. I think that the legislative portfolio will be largely guided by Mike Pence, who is far more conservative than I would ever be in a nightmare, on so many issues. But let's put our grown-up hats on for a minute and go back to a little realpolitik. You don't get to be a congressman for 18 years and then a governor without learning how the sausage is made. You just don't. You learn how to make deals. You learn how to make things work. You learn how to reach across the aisle. That's number one. Number two, it is, and it has been pointed out here and there, it is worth noting that Mike Pence was journalism's best friend in the House for many years, and not once but twice sponsored a federal shield law. Okay? And
it's important to point out that Mike Pence was a former radio talk show host.
That's great. I can't imagine what that was like. Was it the Daily Corn Report? I'm kidding. So I kid. That's what I do. The corn, he was, Indiana corns. I don't know. What else do they grow there, right? Cheese?
Yeah.
No, corn, right? So,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then you have his signaling to the Times that, I never thought about that. And I think, Joe, I sent you the papers, and I've noted this in social media with some irony and amusement. There is a young lady who's a political consultant and talking head named Sherry Jacobus, and she's suing Trump. Elie, did you know Trump is being sued for libel right now?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's in New York Supreme.
I don't know the details of the suit, but I knew that it was happening.
Oh yeah. No, she filed the complaint, and he moved. He moved for dismissal, 30-11, and I read his papers. Now, and his papers basically defend on hyperbole and rhetoric, which doesn't surprise anybody, because he said all these nasty things about her. She's a dummy or something like that. But I found it very, very interesting and amusing that, his lawyers did a competent enough job, and they preserved the issue of actual malice. Donald Trump preserved the issue of actual malice in his motion to dismiss and in his reply papers, just in case, he loses his motion to dismiss. And, we live in New York, we live in the interlocutory heavens. So he can raise the actual malice argument to the First Department if he had to. And I find that kind of ironic. There's no estoppel, in the legislative sense. But, you look at what a guy says and then you look at what a guy does, right? I mean, that's true for any of us. And look, he's got so much on his plate. I think I agree with a lot of folks who think he had no idea what he was getting into. He had no idea how big the job was. And frankly, there are so many more pressing issues, facing him, that the idea that he's going to wage some jihad against the press let's just say, it's good to be vigilant, but I think it's way premature. And there's another point in a conversation, I can't remember with whom. I want to say Canaletta, but I could be wrong. And there's something else you've got to remember about this guy's personality. If you thought Obama was a narcissist, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is a guy who craves attention. This is a guy who wants to be loved and respected. He wants people to point at him and go, look, there's Donald Trump. He really wants to be loved. I mean, it's a weird, neurotic way he goes about it. But this is a guy who craves attention. He loved being on television more than anything else. And
he's going to get a few years of it.
Him actually saturating the airwaves with, press conferences or direct to audience means.
Facebook Live.
Addresses.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's like Facebook Live, his version of Fireside Chat, which I assume involves some garish gold-plated thing. Well,
he already did one, and it was fairly dry. I don't know if you saw it. He did a little YouTube video, and Politico did a pretty good article about it, and they were actually very, very fair, because some people in the press are a little concerned that, oh my God, we're going to have an official state organ, and we're going to have an official state sort of media outlet, and it'll be Trump TV, and he will, and as you pointed out, he would hardly be the first president to reach directly to the voters. And there's nothing wrong with that. Here's the caveat, and this indeed is a huge First Amendment question, or something to be vigilant about. I personally have no problem with an official channel, right? If Trump wants to make his own little videos or do his tweets or have his radio speech or even a podcast, God only knows. I have no problem with that. The only point is it becomes a problem when it is the only channel available. See, this is the difference between, communist China and the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, and even really today, Russia today is ostensibly it's independent, but it's a house organ, and opposition viewpoints are not tolerated in Russia. What's going on in Turkey, right? They have sent armed troops to take over newspapers and radio stations. And being an international lawyer and having the experience I do around the world in the oppression of free speech, I think we're a long way off from that. I think even the people you fear as Trump supporters would revolt if Trump sent the National Guard to take over the Washington Post. I got to tell you guys, the libertarians would, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I think that's true. I guess we're coming close to we're a little over what we usually do, but the one thing I wanted, and it kind of segues off of that to throw back in is, and this is from a Facebook conversation that both you and I were on, actually about the Glenn Greenwald piece.
Uh-huh.
To the extent you're thinking that there could be better investigative journalism that like Greenwald's talking about, is there some fear that the access journalism might just be baked into the existence of these publicly owned news entities who have to answer to shareholders, who therefore have to put on the cozy interviews because that's what people flock to watch, and that it's really just these private institutions like a New York Times that have the latitude to do the investigative, hard-hitting stuff.
The New York Times is a private institution only to a very limited degree. It's a publicly traded company, man.
Right. Yeah, fair.
And that's what all
fair.
Editorialists screaming about Citizens United and
right.
Corporations shouldn't have
aside.
free speech rights. It's like, dude, corporation signs your paycheck, So
put aside that nuance. I meant more that is there a risk that the entertainment, infotainment kind of takeover of the culture of the media consumer has kind of spoiled the crop for some of these larger outlets? Oh,
I see what you're saying. Or put another way, is there any profit to be had in investigative journalism? I mean, that's really
exactly.
I think what you're asking.
that's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, and indeed that is a huge problem. Some folks, to their great credit, have tried to step in and fill that void by removing the profit motive. I'm thinking of Paul Steiger and ProPublica. I'm thinking of Omidyar and The Intercept. Whether you like the quality or editorial slant is a separate issue, but these are ostensibly, organizations doing investigative work, and the Daily Caller Foundation on the other side of the political spectrum. These are organizations that are, trying to free themselves of the profit restraint that they obviously have. And Bezos is not running a nonprofit, but he sure is dumping good money into the Post. I'm not sure though that. I wonder aloud whether you're putting the cart before the horse. That people want the access journalism, and therefore that's why Washington goes the way it goes. I'm not entirely convinced that that's it. I think that access journalism is really a function of a couple of things. One, lazy journalists. Two, I would say in the past 10 to 15 years, the emergence of journalists as celebrities, right? Where reporters want to be inside. They want to be kingmakers. They want to be part of the conversation rather than reporting the conversation. An Ezra Klein or a Matty Iglesias would have been unthinkable 25 years ago. It's because they don't have the chops, they don't have the experience and background to write about, the White House and government. But the star-making machinery of the internet has allowed people like that. And this isn't about my liking them or not liking them, but it's allowed people who don't have real repertorial skills to become celebrities. So the access culture of journalism, particularly political journalism, that's important to keep in mind. I think
right.
I'm not sure that it's profit driven. I think because there are some terrific reporters out there. I mean, I'm thinking of the folks at the Associated Press in particular who don't play that game. They go out there and cover their stories. Now they don't get the big bang, that a BuzzFeed or a Vox might get. And perhaps that's problematic, but I'm not so sure that it's market driven. I'm not so sure that that access journalism is simply, well, that's what people are buying. I'm not going to say it isn't, but I just don't quite. I'm not quite convinced that there's that connect there.
Yeah,
yet.
let's hope there isn't. Yeah, thanks for coming. We've been a little bit long, but hopefully everybody has stuck with us because this was a great episode. Got a lot of stuff covered. Thanks for joining us, Charles.
Well, thanks for having me, guys, and I look forward to, as always, reading your posts and reading Above the Law and seeing what kind of trouble and shit you're stirring up.
Yeah, well,
both of you.
And again, let us know when you're in the neighborhood, because I at least am usually here.
Oh, you got it. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to ring off.
All right, thank you.
Bye now.
Peace out.
And thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Thinking Like a Lawyer. First things first, you should be listening to us through some subscription device. And if you are, you should give us a review on that device because that helps us reach more people. Share this episode wherever you can. If you're listening, if you haven't downloaded the Legal Talk Network app, you can do that and listen to the show through that, as well as all the other shows that the Legal Talk Network puts out. If you are going to see anyone over the next few weeks, so as we're in the holiday season, be sure to tell them, why aren't you listening to the Legal Talk Network? And more importantly, why aren't you listening to Thinking Like a Lawyer? Those seem like good things for you to do. Otherwise, we will talk to you on a future episode of Thinking Like a Lawyer. Thanks.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. You can also find us at AboveTheLaw.com, ATLRedline.com, iTunes, RSS, Twitter, and Facebook. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.